Sports betting is becoming more and more popular across the United States, but Wisconsin has lagged behind. With other states in the Midwest making it legal, pressure is mounting for the state of Wisconsin to do the same. An expert in the process is betting on Bucky to make a change.
The state of Wisconsin is still without fully legalized sports betting, even though many of the nearby states have legalized it in recent years. With venues like Lambeau Field in Green Bay and the Kohl Center in Madison, Wisconsin has die-hard sports fans who are eagerly waiting their chance to sports bet. Founder and president of Rotowire, Peter Schoenke revolutionized the fantasy sports industry and has shifted his focus to a new effort. Wisconsin is a state that has tribal gaming, so there are a number of tribes that have casinos, and they have an agreement with the state and give a ton of money to Wisconsin in turn so they can offer betting. Some of the recently amended agreements have now allowed for sports betting, but still no mobile sports betting. Peter offers the best example of an insider that isn't bogged down by state politics.
Rotowire, it's Peter Schoenke.
Fantasy sports has evolved into a $7 billion market if you look at all of the money that's flowing in there from advertising and paid contests, and people buy like DirecTV, and if you figure in what percentage of that is there for their fantasy, so it's like a $7 billion industry. The bigger companies are ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, NFL.com, and the daily fantasy sports sites like DraftKings and FanDuel. Rotowire works with all of them. I led the effort from the trade association and from the industry to lobby to, confirm that fantasy sports were legal, that paid fantasy sports contests were legal games of skill. And we passed legislation now up to 25 states that have shown that it is clearly legal, and they've added consumer protection measures and a way to license them in these states, and many of the states. And so I did things like testify before Congress, and I testified in a dozen state legislatures about fantasy sports legislation. And then in turn, when the Supreme Court overturned the limitation on sports betting outside of Nevada, I've been involved in that process as well, helping to lobby for legalized sports betting in states. So a lot of people say, oh, hey, Pete, and you and the FSGA and the FSTA before that, thanks for getting sports betting going. And we didn't really do that because it was a Supreme Court decision that was kind of unrelated to fantasy sports and the whole movement we were doing. But what we did do is we educated all these states and the state legislatures and attorney generals about how online gaming works, and knowing your customer, and all the fraud and type of programs you can put in to prevent that, anti-money laundering, all those kinds of systems. And they got comfortable with that, to know that, oh, hey, we legalized paid fantasy sports, we had all this consumer protection, and it works.
So what's going on in Wisconsin? What are they missing out on, and how can they make the change?
So Wisconsin's had a couple efforts to legalize sports betting. I mean, there was a bill that Vorpagel was behind, and tried to make it so that there could be online sports betting in the state. Didn't really go very far. The tribal gaming in Wisconsin is very afraid of online sports betting and iGaming. They feel like that's going to take people away from their casinos, that they'll lose foot traffic, and that's where they make the money. But if you actually look at it, in states like Michigan and New Jersey, where they have both legalized iGaming, online sports betting, and physical casinos, the casinos are doing great. I mean, so it really hasn't impacted them at all. And so I think that the worries for the tribal gaming in Wisconsin are just overdone, and that there's a lot of reasons for them to actually benefit from online sports betting and iGaming. So we're trying to, as a country and as a trade group and as Rotowire, we're trying to advocate for legal sports betting, so that consumers have that ability to go do it in a legal fashion, get the consumer protection measures, and and then have the tax revenue so the government can benefit, and hopefully use that to mitigate any of the problems with sports betting. And Wisconsin's missing out on a lot of that because they don't have the online aspect. And in addition, they're missing out on a lot of potential tax revenue in business, and because all the neighboring states have sports betting, or most of them do. I mean, you have Indiana, which isn't border but very close. You have Illinois, you have Iowa, and you have Michigan. The only one that doesn't is Minnesota. Minnesota actually has a bill in the legislature this year to add mobile sports betting. So it seems like that's going to happen sooner rather than later. So Wisconsin's really kind of on an island, and even though these casinos have added in-person physical sports betting, they're just not going to be competitive if somebody can drive over the border in one of these states and do a mobile sports betting bet.
Peter expects Wisconsin to be making a change relatively soon.
It'll probably take a while because the tribal gaming is I can see why they're guarded about having online sports betting, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And the competition from the other states is probably going to force their hands.
Although there is no official proposal on the table for fully legalized sports betting in Wisconsin, Schoenke's words offer a glimmer of hope for those patiently waiting. In the meantime, cheeseheads will just have to make their way to the Oneida and Potawatomi casinos for their sports betting needs.